I am a medical student at UT Southwestern. I'm in my 3rd year, so I'm going to be moderating, facilitating this workshop here, and I would love to introduce y'all to the rest of the panelists. Here we go. Oh, actually, before we begin, we are going to start with surah recitation. So this is Surah Al-Alaq. I guess I'm going to read it. So, Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqa al-insana min 'alaq. Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram, alladhi 'allama bil qalam, 'allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. So the translation for that in English being, read in the name of your Lord, who has created all that exists, has created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who has taught that writing by the pen, has taught man that which he knew not. And I think this is one of the first verses that was revealed to our prophet. And for me, what this connotates is just the spirit of knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge in Islam, that being a fundamental part of our religion. And inshallah, I hope y'all can testify to that as well while studying medicine, that this is something that brings you closer to your religion as well, and just a closer appreciation of all that is divine in this world. So a little about AMWPA. It's a nonprofit organization founded in 2008 here in DFW. It's a group of female Muslim physicians and dentists, allied health professionals promoting and putting forth preventative medicine in the community. So the vision being to promote the health, welfare, and education of women. So you may have seen that we've been fairly active during the pandemic, educating the community. There's been a bunch of Zoom workshops, providing masks throughout the Metroplex. We've also hosted vaccine drives at the masajids, different community centers. It's been really good. AMWPA has also provided meals for frontline workers and has also offered merit awards to students in medicine, Muslim women students. So there's a lot of good work being done. I've been particularly passionate myself about the mentorship program, which was launched maybe 2 years ago now. Hiba Zakaria, who is not here right now, but who's been fundamental to keeping the steam going. She's been so good at making sure these workshops are happening. Again, I'm really passionate about mentorship. I think it's really important that, you know, in your own journey, I'm sure you've had multiple individuals who have kind of led you through this path of medicine and in all aspects of life, whether it's medicine, personal, spiritual, what have you. And I think it's really important to pay it back and pay it forward. So for future generations to enjoy and to benefit from all that you've learned and all that's been passed along to you as well. So yeah, stay tuned, stay plugged in. There's a WhatsApp group. I can share that in the chat. Send me your email. Yeah, it's good. There's a lot of good energy out there. Okay, and now I would love to introduce our panelists. So going down the line, if you could please unmute yourself and give us a little spiel about who you are, why you're here today, and what you're excited about most in medicine.
All right, I can start. I'm MEHVISH. I went to A&M for undergrad, and now I'm here. So I'm really interested in pursuing psychiatry, which was like a recent finding for me that I'm really excited about. And just kind of giving back to the community and working in socioeconomically disadvantaged populations. So if you're interested in that, please hit me up after and send me an email for any advice.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I am Salman. I went to UTD for undergrad, as you will see is a recurring theme here. And I am currently interested in internal medicine and wanting to go and study cardiology after that. So if you guys have any questions about preventative health, preventative cardiology, feel free to hit me up as well.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is DAANISH. Also went to UTD back in the day, and currently interested in orthopedics.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm YACINE. I am the third person in this panel that has gone to UTD, and I'm still keeping my interest broad, but thinking something surgical.
Cool. And I just wanted to say that I know that all our panelists right now are very UT Southwestern heavy. And so a lot of the, the tips or advice we may have may be really specific to our school. So if any of you are from other schools in Texas or outside of Texas, I really encourage you to speak to the people in your school as well, like people like upperclassmates, because I think they'll better be able to help you navigate kind of your specific dedicated time period and all. So this is my slide. So I think just to start off very high level, what to expect with the step 1 exam. So this I literally just got off the NBME or the AMC website. This is the content that is specific to step 1, and it kind of is very generic. It's broken down in percentages to what kind of content you will see. I think what this tells me, especially the red arrows at the bottom of the screen, is that you should not sleep on the biostats, epi, public health kind of questions. I think this is something that people may put off during the exam studying period. They don't think it comes up that often, but these are like very easy, low-hanging kind of fruit kind of questions. And even the social science, communication, and interpersonal skill questions as well, they come up quite often, and sometimes they're actually tricky, and they're always worded like, pick the one best answer of the following responses. And it's like a patient scenario, and all of the responses, A, B, C, D, E, they look kind of good, they look kind of reasonable as answers, but to actually pick the one best choice, that's really, it's a bit more nuanced than just like, oh, this sounds okay, this sounds like something I may say. So I know there's this YouTube video that's out there. I believe it was Dirty Medicine. They do one on social sciences and communication. And I think that's a really good way for you to just kind of framework how you approach those kinds of questions. But other than that, as you can see, it's mainly the organ systems. There's general principles, and then all the major organ systems, as I mentioned, which hopefully going through your organ blocks right now, you're being well prepared for that as well. And then again, this is another breakdown as to what kinds of questions you're going to be getting. So as you can see, step 1 is really heavy on sort of like the fundamental, like bio, pathophysio kind of questions. So 60 to 70% of those will be like the basic medical knowledge of the science, the basic science concepts. And this is something that I know it really sucks at this stage of your training, transitioning from being an MS2 to an MS3. I've like so much more enjoyed being on clinicals because it just feels a lot more relevant seeing patients and actually be like, oh, this is a clinical presentation and this is how I'm going to treat this patient. And these are other things that I would consider if this treatment doesn't work. But step 1 is very much not that. It's very much just heavy on, do you understand the pathophysiology of the different organ systems? Do you know how to apply that to a very general kind of patient presentation? And I will say, when you come across the questions, the patient presentations that you'll see are very like pathognomonic, high yield. And for the most part is, again, if you're doing UWorld, if you're paying attention in your organ block systems and classes, I think like you'll be in a good place, inshallah. But then again, want to point out the communication and interpersonal skills, they're a very significant part of the exam as well. So don't forget those questions as well while studying. Okay, another breakdown, table of step 1, discipline specifications. This again will show you that pathophys is a majority of the exam. I think what's also very interesting or important to know is that you can see with the immunology, microbiome, biochem, and nutrition, those are all also a very big chunk of that. It's really easy to push off. For me, it was immunology. I didn't really study immunology. I didn't really study the genetics parts of that. And again, like this comes up, it seems low yield. It seems like it's not that important, but you will see those questions. And I think it's really important just to try to incorporate that into your daily studying as much as you can, because you might not be capturing it when you're focusing on just like your organ systems. And with a nutrition aspect, like I saw vitamin deficiencies a whole bunch, and I don't know if the other panelists can attest to that as well, but that came up a lot on the exam. So the vitamin deficiencies is something that I just went through Pixarize and tried my best to cover. But definitely, if I were studying that in a more strategic manner, I would have had a better understanding of those, honestly. So yeah, that's what's on the exam. And now we'll be talking about resources.
Yeah, so I can talk about some of the resources that most likely you're going to use. So we've kind of like ranked these in order of what's most important and kind of essential for you to have. So the first is UWorld. This is like essential. And I believe if you're at Southwestern, they do purchase this for you. But if not, you're going to want to go ahead and purchase this. And it's going to be the bulk of your studying. And the reason for that is that you're both studying and you're practicing questions in a style that you're going to see on the actual exam. So you're kind of getting a 2-in-1 there. So I really would recommend focusing on UWorld. Try to get through at least 80%. And if you can, it's not necessary at all. Personally, I finished 100% and I felt like it helped me a lot on clerkships. Like I feel like I just wasn't studying as much on clerkships because I could remember stuff from step 1. So honestly, if you have the time and the energy, if you're stressed, don't worry about it. I would say like just go ahead and finish it. Next is first aid. So I made the mistake, and I can talk about this a little bit later, but I was just reading through first aid because that's kind of what my school told me to do. And that just was not helping me at all and kind of was a waste of time. So I switched to using it as more of a reference document where like, I saw something unfamiliar. I went into like first aid on my computer and hit the search button, and I was able to kind of read about it and read about things around it that I may not have covered yet. So I think that's kind of how you should use it personally. And then next you have Sketchy. So these are like really amazing for easy points. I think if you don't have a really good learning tool that's visual to learn these little details, it can actually like really get you on the exam and make you lose points. But with Sketchy, like now they become easy points. So if you're like missing, like if you're on the edge of passing or something, that's kind of somewhere that you could maybe focus to get those really easy points. And the next is Pathoma. So I use Pathoma kind of interspersed with questions. But I think, if you used it in your preclinical, you probably noticed that, Dr. Sitar is able to condense things down in such like an incredible way, such an incredible man, mashallah. And then the practice exams are so essential and so important for learning timing. Sorry, Manal. Timing is going to be really important because if you don't have timing, you could miss a lot of questions, and that could be the difference between passing and failing, even if you know the material. The next slide. And then these are some other stuff that we mentioned as well. So Boards and Beyond. This is just a bit longer. I feel like in dedicated, it's hard to have time for this. Dirty Medicine. These are like just short YouTube clips with like mnemonics or like little like explanations. And it's great. Like if you're like, on the bus somewhere, like you're like sitting and waiting in the doctor's office, like this is a great way to get like little mini studying in. This guy on YouTube named Randy Neal. He does these like biostatistics and farm reviews. I would say the biostatistics review is like amazing and definitely a must watch. And then make sure you practice, because I kind of just watched it and then took a practice test and realized I didn't know how to apply it. So make sure you also practice with those UWorld questions. And then you can use Amboss. They have more practice questions, not as great as UWorld. Golden, I ended up using a lot. He has like a very comedic style. And I used to go for runs and listen to him. So that was like a way to kind of do a 2-in-1, which you'll find yourself doing a lot in dedicated. It's a bit older on the content, and sometimes he says things that are not the best, but try to just focus on the content. And then Divine and Pixarize are some other resources too. Yacine or Danish, do you guys want to take this one?
Yeah. So how to study, depending on when you want to start. Yeah, really, how to study is going to depend on where you're at right now, when exactly you have step. I will say, obviously you guys don't have to participate if it's difficult, but if you could raise your hand if you're in MS1, or raise your like virtual hand, that would be great. pause for like 5 seconds. Perfect, play well. And then I know we do have some MS2s in the audience as well. So if you're an MS1, then the best thing that you can do right now to really prepare for STEP and to start studying for it is really to hit the third-party materials as much as possible before you go into dedicated, like while you're in preclinicals. As much as like if you go to UTMB and your exams kind of line up with national board exams, and that's great. You go to another med school and they still somewhat line up, or there's a way that you can do certain third-party materials that line up, that would be great. Really, the main thing that almost every upperclassman at Southwestern has recommended for us going in, and that I wish I had done, is I wish I had had Sketchy Micro and Sketchy Farm down before starting dedicated. So at the minimum, depending on where you're at, if you can go ahead and at least try to commit Sketchy Micro and Sketchy Farm to heart, then that would be great. Now, other than that, one of the advice that we had gotten going in, considering STEP is now pass fail, was that we didn't necessarily need to spend our summer studying for STEP. I think that if anything, if you do have the summer before STEP off and you do want to do a little bit of studying, I don't think it's a bad idea. Just because for us, like we were the COVID class, we had a lot of students that needed extra time, that need an extra 2 weeks. And so if you can go ahead and do a little bit of studying ahead of time, it doesn't hurt. And Sketchy Farm and Sketchy Micro, those are things you just kind of have to have down eventually. Like if you don't have it down for step 1, you need it for step 2. And then other than that, if you're on your second semester and STEP is just around the corner, finish your classes, do them well. Make sure that you really master neuro. That's like probably one of the highest field content areas on the exam. So make sure you ace your neuro exams. And then if you have STEP right after winter break and you have some time during winter break, it's not a bad idea to start studying over winter break. That's what I did. I did about like 6 hours a day, you could say on average. I think I probably went a little harder than others, but started from the bottom all of this, so it worked. But yeah, really, it's really doable. You can get to passing from like way below passing over 6 to 8 weeks time if you work hard enough. But ideally, to save yourself the stress and to really consolidate the material that you'll need for clinicals, it's best to go ahead and start third-party materials as early as you can. Any questions right now, or should we push that off to later? Okay, so regarding creating a schedule, when it comes to creating a schedule, you want to make sure that you know yourself and you know what kind of work ethic and how many hours you can really devote to studying in a day or in a week. One thing that too many of us have done is we would burn ourselves out. And when I say burnout, what real burnout? Like you'll see a lot of us that really need unscheduled self-care days and whatnot. And how do we just, if you just realize that this, like the rest of med school, is a marathon, not a race, you really need to kind of know yourself and know what you can do. I do have a friend right now that's a second year getting ready to start dedicated STEP prep. And what he's doing before starting dedicated is he's kind of like testing out the other third-party materials. He's doing a few UWorld questions and whatnot, just to see how long it takes him and how much energy it takes out of him so that he has a really solid schedule when he goes in. Each of us is different. I personally went 2 weeks of doing just 50 UWorld questions a day and like maybe 2 hours extra worth of content review on average those days, whereas I know other friends that were able to do 140 UWorld questions a day. So everyone's different. Just know yourself and try to pace yourself so that you don't burn out, because you really, like you want to keep up the stamina. You don't want to go down. And somebody else can add to this slide.
I'll just echo Yacine in the sense that UWorld is going to be the bulk of your studying. And I think when you first start UWorld, it's like a totally new platform and you're probably not used to seeing studying done in that way. And so it would take me forever, at least for myself, like just to go through one problem set, which is just 40 questions, and then to review it, it would take me like a whole morning. And I would just be so frustrated with myself because I'd be like, oh my God, I have like 3,000 plus questions that I need to get through. How am I going to do this if like 40 questions is taking me 3 hours? So just keep in mind that, you know, you're going to start off fairly slow. And again, it's because you're getting used to the material, you're starting your content review, you're refreshing things that you've probably learned like over a year ago. But as you get into like the swing of things, it will just move up faster and faster for you. You won't take as long with the review. You'll get through those problem sets so much more quickly. I think, you know, I started off just doing 40 questions a day. And by the end of my 8-week period, I was doing like 120 questions a day. And that's like a lot. I know that's like not something that was sustainable for the long run, but that last week or so, I was definitely doing about 120 and I didn't have to review as long. I would just like skim it. Like everything was kind of familiar to me at that point. So I guess I just say that so that you don't freak out when you first approach UWorld, because it is a lot. It's a lot to be reviewing at once, and it is overwhelming, but after some point, you're going to get the hang of it and it'll feel a lot more natural.
I'll say one more thing is that UWorld increases in value the more that you do. So we have a tendency to, like, when we see our score not being like as where we want it to be in UWorld when we're starting out, like, okay, I just need to go back and do more content. And the unfortunate part is, like, your UWorld scores will improve more from just doing more UWorld than they will from going back and just only focusing on content. And the flip side is also that the more UWorld you do, the more content you cover. And there's so many questions that by the end of, or as you reach closer to the tail end of those questions, you've solidified a lot more content that will stick with you, as opposed to if you were to just try and crack open a book and learn all of medicine from scratch. So I think that it's really important to not fall for that trap of, okay, I just can't touch UWorld until I have a lot more content, because you really, and you'll use this a lot during your clerkships as well. UWorld is going to be your content review. So just kind of get comfortable with not necessarily getting every question right, but learning from every question.
Oh, and one thing I just want to add on that, you have to realize that, and you have to like really believe this, UWorld is not an assessment tool. It is a learning tool. The assessment tool is your practice exams, the NBME. So like, you know, even if you're scoring like 20%, 30% on UWorld, that's not indicative of you or your actual performance, right? It's the practice exams that do that. So just remember, UWorld, a learning tool, practice exams, NBMEs, assessment tool.
Okay, so I thought it might be helpful for y'all to be able to see what a sample 2-week schedule looked like. And so for those of you at UT Southwestern, what they make you do is before you even start dedicated, you have to submit like, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing for my 6 to 8 weeks of whatever dedicated. And they make you fill out this survey of like, have you fulfilled your goals for that week, whatever. So this is what I submitted to UT Southwestern, and I will say that this schedule fell apart really quickly. So I'll just like walk through it with y'all. So I spent a lot of the mornings supposedly going through content reviews. So that was going through first aid, that was going through sketchy, so whether that's sketchy farm or sketchy micro, and then before noon hitting some organ system, and that would be like going through first aid and pathoma. So that's already my whole morning gone just to like this passive kind of content review, whether it was reading first aid or whether it was watching some videos or refreshing my sketchy knowledge by looking at the PDF. And then by the time I got to the afternoon where I had the bulk of my UWorld questions and the problem sets that I want done for the day, I was already exhausted. Like I was like cross-eyed. I did not want to be in the library anymore. I did not want to be studying anymore. So this quickly fell apart for me. I'm definitely much more of a morning person. I have the most energy right when I wake up. Furthermore, even though I am a morning person, I'm not going to be like completely on at 7 a.m. That's kind of how I had it set up for the schedule, is that like, okay, by 7 a.m. I'm sitting at a desk station and ready to go for the day. So that was definitely not helpful for me. I like my mornings, but I also take some time to get started. And so I didn't necessarily start my day of studying until like maybe 9 a.m. And that was perfect for me. What I do like about the schedule is that I was fairly intentional about making sure that I was covering either the biochemistry or the immunology each day. And then I also made sure to cover an organ system. And I know some organ systems are more like intensive than others. And so, you know, if it was like, for example, the nervous system or neurology, I would have like 3 days of the week dedicated to that, versus like something like GI or repro would just be 1 day dedicated to that entirely. So it's really, you just play it around, but I think it was very helpful to me to have something concrete in terms of like, this is the content I'm covering. Again, making sure that I'm doing the biochem, immunology. So these are the basic science stuff that you may have not touched since like first semester of med school. So it was very rusty for me. And so it's important that I got to it. I'll go ahead and show you what my actual 2-week schedule was like. So this is weeks 3 and 4, and I was being very honest with y'all. I showed you my scores for practice NBMEs. So I was not doing too hot, honestly. So I walked into dedicated with having had, I think, the 153 on my first, you know how they make you do an NBME after your last organ block? I had a 153 on that. So I was like, oh, and in poor shape. But I will say, from 153 to the 193 in week 3, that's like a huge steep curve, which is reassuring. It's obviously not like exciting, like, oh my God, I'm the smartest kid out here. But at the same time, it's like I was clearly learning a lot. And so what my actual 2-week schedule looked like was I focused way more on the UWorld. I didn't start UWorld until I entered dedicated. And so it was really important to me that I got through a bulk of that. And so I was making sure that I actually made like at least 40 questions a day, 40 to 60 to 80, and then eventually I was doing 100 to 120. While I was doing UWorld, I made sure that like at least one problem set that I was doing was focused on an organ system, the organ system that I wanted to cover for that day. As SALMAN was saying, like UWorld itself is a great way to cover content. And honestly, when I made that shift of like, I'm no longer gonna like focus on this first aid thing, and I'm just going to go through UWorld as much as possible. Like my goal is to get like through 80% of it. That's when I started to really, really learn the material. So don't freak out if you feel like you're not learning as you usually do. UWorld itself is again and again the best way to learn, I think. Made sure to keep Pesoma there. So Pesoma was something that I was doing consistently. So watching those videos, if I felt like something was rusty, I would rewatch it. Sketchy, I didn't do the sketchy Anki decks. I know there are a couple out there, and I think Mev was a fan of them. I was never an Anki person. And so what I used instead were these PDFs. They're online. I can also send them to y'all if you need them. But that was just like a really good way for me to see the image, and then it would have little notes on it. And so whenever I felt a little bit rusty, I would just like go through that. And I know there's stuff in the chat. So should I stop and look at that? Okay, Anki.
We're answering them as we go, but you can feel free. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. But as I said, okay, switched, completely focused on UWorld. Did that in the morning. I thought it was such a good day if like by the time I got to the library, it was 9 a.m., did my UWorld, and by like noon, I had at least 40 questions done. I felt so accomplished. So it was a really good way to prop up the rest of the day. I had really good days off. So you can see I took a whole day off on Sundays. Fridays were my drama days, so I would take half days off then. And so I would only do like 40 questions that day. And then in terms of practice exams, I was doing those like at least every week. And then sometimes I would do them like every 5 days or so. So that was my actual 2-week schedule.
Okay, so I can kind of talk about my schedule too. So kind of what Manal was saying, we were studying together actually. So nobody was really like checking us when we were doing this stuff. But I was just making similar mistakes. Like I was passively studying in the mornings. I was exhausted by the afternoon. I was trying to push myself through these questions and like being ineffective and burning myself out at the same time. It was just like a really bad combination. There is like a golden study document that was floating around at our school, and I'm sure they exist at other schools too. I think one thing I learned from that is that you've been studying for preclinicals for a year, 2 years, year and a half, whatever, like, you know what works for you, and just like abandoning everything that you know and love to like do something that someone else has created that worked for them. Like, it's probably not the best thing, you know, like you have to take these like advice, even the advice we're giving you, with like your own customization, because like, you know yourself and you know what's going to work for you. So don't just like follow things blindly is what I would say. And then this is kind of an example of my schedule eventually that I got to after a lot of like iterations and being like, okay, like this isn't working. And I think like Danish mentioned this in the chat too, like you have to be willing to be like, okay, this isn't working for me. I'm going to drop it and just turn things around, and don't let it freak you out. And don't just keep like pushing through something that like deep down, you know, is not working for you. Like, don't be afraid to just like try something new. So just like a disclaimer for this, I took 8 weeks to study. And so I got through 100% of UWorld. So I realized that like, this is a lot, and like, you should not feel the need to do this much. But if you have the time and you're willing to start a little bit earlier, then it's something you can do. But what I did was, you know, I woke up every morning around 6 a.m. I did 80 questions. And the way that I did it is that I would do a question, and then I would go to the explanation, be like, okay, like I kind of remember this. And then I would go to the Pathoma video related to that, watch the Pathoma, and then go straight back to questions. So that's how I avoided passive learning, where I was like doing content review, but I was keeping myself engaged and not just sitting there for 3 hours that I was doing initially. And then I would like, you know, take a lunch break. I would like pray Zohar, like whatever. And then I would like do the same thing again. At this point, I'd be completely exhausted. Like my brain is drained. UWorld is very exhausting. And I would just like go for a run. Like, I think exercise is so important during dedicated to like get your stress out, to like stay sane, to like I think dedicated can be very like physically taxing in a way too. So I think exercise is really important to just like keeping your mind sharp and your body strong. And I would like listen to the Golden audios while doing this as a form of content review. And then I put this here. I would have like my scheduled breakdown cry or whatever. Like I remember like crying and being really stressed during dedicated a lot. So like, I don't know, I just wanted to be like transparent about that. Like there were some days where I just like did not believe in myself, and I felt so much imposter syndrome. And I was like, I'm so dumb. I don't belong here. Like, why did I get 40% on this UWorld block? And like, that happens, and it's okay. Like, it's part of the process. And then I would like cope by like watching TV with like my husband and like doing the sketchy Anki, just passively like looking at these sketches and like watching like New Girl or something. So I did that like every day. On Fridays, I would take the day off and go to Jummah. And then I think this is really essential, is like using the weekend and like ideally try to do it so that it's like actually on the day they're going to take the exam or something. Like, take that exam, and then after, like, sit down and really analyze, like, why did you miss this question? Were you missing content? Was it a stupid question, which happens? How can you like kind of see the stupid question coming and understand what they're trying to ask you? If that makes sense. Like, sometimes there's a way that they're asking you, and you have to like kind of learn to like hack that. Like, it wasn't that you didn't know it. It's just that they asked the question in a weird way. So they do that sometimes. So like kind of have that analysis for each question. And then at the end of it, make a plan for the following week. Like, okay, I'm actually pretty weak on cardio, which this exam showed me. So now like, I'm going to kind of focus on cardio questions, or when I do content review, it's going to be mostly cardio, stuff like that. And then on Sundays, I would like, there's a lot of like little random stuff like ethics and public health and like biostats and stuff that's like not as big organ block focused. So it's important to like also keep up with that and make sure to review that, because it's really like, it's easy for that to fall by the wayside as well. And then like, I didn't actually put it on the slide, but like, I'll be honest about like my practice score. So I think I started before dedicated with like a 170 or something. And then after 2 weeks, like I was able to jump up to like a 196. So like I was able to like bridge that gap. So like Manal said, like it's, or someone mentioned, like the initial score is really scary, but like it happens. Like eventually you're able to get to a score where you're passing. And then after 3 weeks, so this is kind of like, I'll be honest, like I was being inefficient and I was totally burning myself out. So I dropped down to a 194 and I started to like kind of panic and be like, okay, like I genuinely feel like I am rushing. I didn't have enough time to study. Like I need to extend my time. So that's when I extended my time and delayed my exam. And I started taking more breaks and just like stopped studying for like long periods and just was so much better after that. So I cannot underscore this enough. Do not make the mistake that I did of burning yourself out, studying constantly, like letting your anxiety get to you and like not allowing yourself to be human to the point that like your performance is now diminishing, because that can happen. It did happen to me. And I know there's like a lot of questions too about like different resources and content. One warning I would say is it's very easy to get overloaded by content and resources. Try to pick a few resources that you know work for you and study those in depth. You don't want to cover everything because then you're going to end up not doing even one thing really well. I hope that helps.
Okay, so before I get into this, let me set the scene, and Yacine, feel free to jump in. So basically, how this kind of, what you're seeing on the board came about was, our deans just emailed us like, hey, it's time to, register for step one. And then, I shoot Yacine a message. I'm like, hey, yo, like, let's, get our plan down for step one prep. And this was like, what, maybe November? Yeah, around like November. And we were scheduled to take a step in like mid to late February. So a couple months out. But yeah, so we're in the library, like, we're pulling out all like, all of our resources, like, oh, what could we use? What can't we use? And then how many weeks we have. And, we're literally in the library for like 3-4 hours, like coming up with this. Legitimately, and this actually happened, we ended up like scaring apparently we're going at it a little loudly and ended up like scaring off like the people in the adjacent rooms. But anyway, so point being, like, we came up with this whole like grand master plan, which, had we executed this, I'm sure we would have been ready for like step 2 and step 1, right? We basically, or me personally, probably out of everything you see on there, maybe only did 10% of all of that, right? So the moral of the story of this slide being, yeah, see, like less than 10% of that plan. So, yeah, so trying to like then like, coming up with like, the kind of like these neat little grid schedules, like MEHVISH and MANAL were able to have like something, but the problem is there was like so much, like, because like I had planned so much from the get-go, every time I fell through on not doing something, it would just like, it would just like end up making me feel worse and worse as like, and it just like kind of ended up snowballing. And then like based on like our school was like telling us to like, read first aid. And then I ended up wasting like almost half my dedicated time with that. And so a lot of things were like going wrong during my dedicated experience. And so it kind of ended up just being like, putting out fires as they arose. And yeah, and then, there were like issues of like practice test scores not being like as high as I needed them to be. But, I'll admit it in the context of like a pass-fail exam, right? So ended up then taking like an extension, and then, alhamdulillah, like everything worked out. But I think just like kind of like reflecting on that whole experience is that, you have to be adaptable to whatever individual circumstances you have. And I think a big part of that is to like kind of streamline your plan. Manal, yeah, Josh, yeah, I definitely did. Yep. Yeah, so yeah, I think, yeah, so I think the key part is, ego is the enemy. Just don't force yourself to be like, hey, I came up with this plan, I'm going to stick to it. Just drop whatever isn't working. Be more flexible than I was. Please don't read first aid. Just start with UWorld. That's like one of the biggest pieces of advice I can like kind of impart here now. But yeah, just be very adaptable and, streamline your plan to just the bare essentials, right? Like tried and true resources that we've been kind of discussing, for the past hour, and plan for contingencies. So, obviously, inshallah, you won't ever have to use it, but, having an escape hatch of like in the form of like a 2-week extension is not the worst thing, or I mean, at least in art, based on like how our school does things, wasn't the worst thing in the world. So, maybe when you guys are like making up your schedules, if you have the opportunity to like maybe either you guys have the option of like having a 2-week extension on your dedicated period, or maybe you can like schedule in like a light elective, so you have like some like that doesn't burn you out too much and could possibly give you some extra study time. But basically just give yourself options basically to get what it is you need done, which is past step 1. But yeah.
I just wanted to, just like kind of add to that, because I didn't really have my schedule up there, but I know that we've said a lot of scary things to some people. I just wanted to add a little bit of a different perspective. I, for one, really enjoyed dedicated. I thought that I had kind of made a schedule that was like pretty manageable for me. So I don't want you guys to think that like dedicated is just about pain and suffering. It's the biggest, I mean, Danish said it really well. You have to put aside your ego and find what works for you. And if that means, you need to take a break smack dab in the middle of your day to work out, that's okay. If it's like 3 o'clock and you've only done, a third of what you want to do, but that you're still okay with working after that, that's fine. But the key is to just keep moving. Like, don't be stagnant. Keep moving, and then like find what works for you. We've already talked about this, but there's no point in just hammering a resource that doesn't work for you. Some people didn't like first aid. I liked it for the immunology and biochem. Didn't really use it much for anything other than that. But the point is, yeah, find a schedule that works for you, and don't like just the biggest thing that will help you is not being burned out. Because when you're tired, you're not going to be actively learning. And 3 or 4 or 5 hours of active learning every day is worth more than 10 hours of just sitting there while the video is screaming at you. So anyway, Yacine, you can go ahead and talk about the schedule now.
Yeah, everything everybody said so far is golden. Really, the reason why I wanted to share my sample schedule was just to kind of drive home sort of what someone already said, which is you don't need to work 10, 12, 15, 16 hours a day. One thing it's actually tougher to work that many hours over dedicated, especially if it's during the winter, because the days are so short. So really what I focused on, this is just kind of a brief overview of what I've done over the 10 weeks of dedicated that I had. So winter break started, and I wanted to get a little ahead. So I kind of needed to, because I started with a really low baseline MBME score. So I just kind of started doing some practice questions. I did about 6 hours a day. What that means, I didn't necessarily, I didn't schedule off days, but what I would do is some days I'd work 12 hours, some days I'd only work 2 to 3 hours and take the rest of the day off. So that's kind of just how I planned out my schedule. I just wanted to make sure I was averaging about 8 hours a day. During winter break, I just took it a little lighter because I was just kind of getting my feet wet. And then weeks 3 and 4, I went a little harder. Weeks 5 and 6, weeks 5 and 6, I got a little burnt out with the UWorld questions, because a lot of other classmates were like studying other material, doing a lot of reviewing of their first aid and whatnot. And so I felt like, maybe, and like, is UWorld really all I should be doing or not? But really, whenever I take an MBME, it'd be a reminder that UWorld is the way. So I kept going through UWorld. I think MEHVISH said she finished all of UWorld in about 6 to 8 weeks. That's very tough to do for some of us. So for me, it took me, the full 9 to 10 weeks to just do 70% of UWorld. The way I treated UWorld was kind of like a textbook, like a question-based textbook, where I'd go through a question and then I'd read all of the explanations. And I thought it really helped me, because what it did is it really, like, I would go through the question, answer the question, probably like 60% of the time get it wrong, pretend that that was an actual patient that died on me. And then that would kind of prime me to read the entire passage and explanation so that I could really absorb all of the explanations in UWorld. And the cool thing with that is I think I still had a solid plan, and that my MBME scores gradually went up. Now, I will say, word of caution, the UWorld assessments do not really as accurately predict your scores. So my UWorld assessment went down, but like was way lower than my MBMEs, but it like they tend to either over or under predict. So the MBMEs are a little more surefire measurements. So what ended up happening is, I just kept chugging through UWorld from day one. And because I had started off with UWorld from day one, I was a little more ahead of a lot of my classmates at the time. At the beginning, kind of slowed down eventually, but I saw progress. I just kept up the momentum, and then eventually I took it. And yeah, I happily took 2 extra weeks for my 2 extra. Like, I asked for a 2-week extension. A lot of us got 2-week extensions. Each of us for different reasons. I didn't reach my score yet, but I also did not want to put in like 15-hour work days. So I think oh wait, this is being recorded. Gosh darn it. Yeah, the main thing is, you'll gradually see your scores go up and things will be good. And just keep in mind, this is winter break though, so the days are very short, which if you're like me, you get more sleepy when it gets dark. So yeah, I don't think there's, oh, and one last thing. I didn't do Anki other than this one UWorld Anki deck that I found during the last 2 weeks. And I think that UWorld Anki deck helped me a lot. So if you do Anki, if you didn't start it in preclinicals, then if you just want to like make a UWorld Anki deck or make a UWorld journal, kind of review your UWorld somehow, I think it would be very helpful.
All right, so we talked a little bit about practice exams earlier. I just wanted to give one comprehensive slide for it, but I averaged about 1 test per week, and this is strictly for assessment. It does help with content as well, but really UWorld is going to be your focus for the content and should not be used as assessment, which we've reiterated a couple of times now. And you basically have 2 options when it comes to your practice test. So you can buy an NBME exam. Some schools will pay for at least 1, I think. But each NBME exam has 200 questions. The actual exam has 280, but I wouldn't worry about it being 80 questions less. When the time comes for the actual exam, you'll have adrenaline pumping through your veins to keep you going. But I would shoot for about at least 3 or 4 NBME exams, and UWorld also gives you 2 practice tests as well. Each one of those is 160 questions. So I think that the NBME exams are pretty good predictors of your score. UWorld, the score predictions are a little bit strange. There are like there's like Reddit threads that talk about how UWorld 1 and UWorld 2 forms convert to your actual scores. And it kind of just depends on each person specifically. But I would say the NBMEs are usually pretty good assessment tools. And so I would schedule 1 every week. So I would pick Saturday to take an exam and then take the rest of the day off. So an exam would take about like 6 hours, I think, 5 or 6 hours. Take the rest of the day off. And then the following day, I would just spend that day just to review and and I would kind of write down, like, just on a piece of paper, what topics I was missing the most of. And then I think about 2 weeks out, I had compiled those papers from like the 5 exams that I had taken. And I like wrote down the number of questions from each topic that I was missing. And so that last week I was spending like that according amount of time reviewing those topics. So I was missing a lot of questions on like reproductive. So I would go back and I would look at the first aid video or first aid chapter for reproductive, or I would look at some like Pathoma videos or whatever videos that I thought were the most helpful. I think I used Pathoma the most. But the point is that you're reviewing them and you're keeping track of which topics you're consistently missing, so that when you're doing UWorld as well, you know which explanations to focus on more. And that's also a skill that you build over time, is you become faster because you know what you actually need to be spending time reviewing on UWorld versus what you just missed because you just didn't read the question right, or something silly. And then, yeah, you want to fill in the content gaps as you're going with your preferred resources. For me, I use a lot of Pathoma. I use first aid for like the really science heavy topics. And then I think sometimes I would sprinkle in like sketchy, but for the most part, I think the first two are what I relied on. Get the next slide. Yeah, and so one thing that kind of plays into a lot of like how you schedule your day is where you're going to be studying. I just did not like studying at home, and I felt like that was a huge reason why. I think that's a huge reason why some people are miserable, because there's no separation between like their home and this one exam that's causing them so much grief and stress. So as soon as I woke up in the morning, I would go to campus and just study in the library for the first 5 or 6 hours. And then I would take a break. I would go and go to the gym, and then go and find another location in the evening. But sometimes I would switch it up. Instead of going to the library, I would go to a coffee shop. And so if you're in the Dallas area, here are some coffee shops. You can go to Cuppa or Pax and Beneficia, both in Irving. There's Magnolias and White Rhino in Dallas. And then, of course, if you just want to go to a Starbucks that's near you, that's always fine. Point is, going to a coffee shop that's that you enjoy going to and you can go to consistently, I think is helpful, because I think when you have a routine, it allows you to get in that zone with less friction. So you just sit down and your brain knows, hey, I'm in this spot again, it's time to study, as opposed to like you're going to a different spot every day and you're not really, it takes you some time to really get in the groove again. Of course, any local library, for us, SMU libraries are pretty nice to study at. I didn't personally go there very often, but I know a lot of people that did. And I think they have like a couple of free parking spots on campus as well. Public libraries, school, like I said, I really enjoyed studying at school because I had a lot of friends that were on dedicated. And even though we weren't really studying together, it was nice to know that people were suffering as well with me. And then there were also like times where we would at least be able to get lunch together. People that were packing lunch, we would take like 30 minutes or an hour, however long we wanted for lunch, and just talk to each other and like bounce ideas off each other and say like, hey, here's what's going well, here's what's not working. A lot of times having someone to talk to that's going through step that you trust, that you can kind of like vent about. They'll say, I had a similar problem, here's what I did to circumvent that. For example, I was starting off very similar to MANAL schedule, where I was doing content first and then questions later. And I realized that doing all my passive studying first left me with like very little energy by the time I got to my active studying. And then that turned my active studying into passive studying, which is never a good position to be in. So all that to say is find whatever spots are most comfortable for you and a spot that you can go to consistently. But I would really recommend finding a spot where you or other people, like where other people that are studying. And then also like preferably in a spot that isn't home, because you want to be able to go home after a long day of studying and just relax and unwind. And it's really hard to do that if that spot is 2 feet from where you were just studying for 8 hours, 10 hours. Yeah, the last point, yeah, study with your peers. I think that's the most important thing, because it's really easy to get burned out.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about this. So it can be both easy and difficult to kind of stay connected to your faith during dedicated. Difficult in that like you're so busy and you're like doing this stuff day in and day out, and it's very easy to get like tunnel visioned and think like, this is the most important thing in the world, when in reality, like, we're all Muslim, we know it's not. It's like our faith and akhirah and our connection to God is the most important thing in the world. So it's really important to, like, you know, schedule things to make sure that you're staying connected. So make sure you're scheduling in your prayers into your study time, and use it as like a break, like a genuine break, to just like kind of stop, reset, and have your like spiritual reset. And then it's really important to, like, you know, find a buddy too. Like, it's nice to study with other Muslims because you guys can all pray together and you can like keep yourself accountable. And then obviously, like, you know, if you're in a coffee shop and like you're gonna go in the bathroom and put your foot in the sink, like, you may want to think about stuff like that. And like having places where like you're comfortable to make wudu and pray and stuff like that, so you're not like caught in a bad place and stressed out about it. And then yeah, like I took a lot of Fridays off just because like it's nice to like be able to go to the masjid and like be able to like you know, reconnect that way, and use that as your day off, which, like, you know, it kind of should be as well. And then, you know, besides just your everyday salah, like making sure that like you have other things to help give you reminders and keep you connected. You know, some examples here is like mindful moments, or like reading Quran, listening to a lecture. Like I would try to like tune into the Roots lectures and stuff, and just like try to be like, okay, like let me have Abdurrahman Murphy just like tell me a joke and make me feel better right now, you know. So like stuff like that really helps. And the last thing I'll add is like, you know, dedicated, maybe for everyone but Salman, can be a stressful time, right? You have a lot of pressure, you have daily critical feedback, right? Like as much as we want to use UWorld as a study tool, it's hard to look at a percentage and be like, wow, like I am constantly evaluating myself every day. And there's a lot of unknowns, right? And I think more than a lot of other areas in medical school or in life, like this is one of those spots where there is a lot of unknowns. Like, oh, maybe I won't pass. Like maybe this bad thing will happen. Like maybe. And like, you know, try to channel those feelings. You know, with hardship comes ease, right? So like this hardship is happening for a reason for everybody but Salman. And you want to channel that into your religion, and, you know, understand that it's happening to you for a reason. You're going to be a better person because of it. So really, if you're feeling those feelings, if you're feeling that fear, anxiety, fear of the unknown, all of those feelings, instead of channeling that into like, you know, torturing yourself, which I know a lot of type A, high anxious people in medical school do, try to channel that back into your religion and use that as a means to connect with your faith, inshallah.
Just to clarify, dedicated was not easy. I enjoyed it, but it doesn't mean that it was easy. I worked hard, but at the end of the day, you can't stress over things too much. You do what you can and leave the rest to God. Just wanted to put that out there because I feel like everybody thinks that I just coasted through. I was still working a similar amount of hours, but anyways, continue.
This is so funny to me, but yeah, I just to put some du'as that I find particularly reassuring on the slide, so I'm not going to labor you by reading them out. I love the Musa dua as well. It's not on here. I don't know why I didn't put it, but it's the one that's Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. It's the one where Musa recites before seeing the Pharaoh, of like, you know, expand my chest, loosen the knot from my tongue so that I can speak more eloquently, or so that they can understand me. These are constant duas that I'm making even like before presentations in front of my attendings. Like I'm generally an anxious person. Oh, that's a really bad slide, sorry. But generally just have some go-to ones that you can memorize, that you can lean on whenever you're feeling really stressed out. Honestly, like I feel like just repeating them over and over again when I'm really anxious just calms me down as well. So whatever you like, whether it's a Quran verse or a dua specifically from hadith, whatever, just go for it. It's really important. Oh, this is an important slide. Other self-care. So I think we all probably scared y'all in talking about how it was a really difficult time. So these are just some tips I think would help in terms of managing your stress. Mev already touched on taking care of your deen and your iman. That's super duper important. But in terms of other things you can do, go schedule like an appointment to get your physical done with your PCP. This is something I learned recently. I am severely anemic, and I should have known that earlier, but anyhow, these things can really impact how you operate, how your mind functions, how you feel about your day, how much energy you have. So, you know, whether it's a vitamin deficiency, anemia, what have you, this can really impact your studying. And honestly, like, I don't even like to think about it like, oh, this is going to impact your studying. It's also just you are in this for a long run. Like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Like, you need to take care of yourself. And healthcare professionals notoriously don't. And again, we don't want to be, this is like, our bodies are a trust from Allah, it's an amana, and we should really be honoring our bodies by taking care of them. Furthermore, pack lunches and plenty of study snacks. I would carry like trail mix, I would carry granola bars, dried fruit, candy, whatever. I think it's really important just that you have a repertoire of snacks. So like, you like, the excuse to give up for the day is not that you're hungry. If you're ever hungry, just have those snacks ready so that you can keep going. In terms of taking time off, I thought I was phenomenal at this, mashallah. Like, I am never going to give up a break of mine. So I would actually take those either half days off or full days off. And I would make sure to like plan something really fun for those days. So whether it's like an activity or like seeing some friends or getting dinner with somebody, like, I would make sure that those are something that I could look forward to. And I would also not study at all. Like, even if you have like half a day and you feel guilty, like, oh, I didn't review this one UWorld problem set, like, even if it's something as passive as reviewing something on first aid, like, that's still going to burn you out. And again, this is something that you're doing for weeks. Like, you do not want to burn out. Back to the meals, like, make sure you're getting your meals in a proper time. Lunches are a great time to just go outside, get some fresh air, go for a walk. Oh yeah, modify UWorld. You can get rid of that feature where you see the percentage correct so that you can compare like how you're doing compared to other students. That's sometimes really toxic and taxing. Reach out to your support system. I would frequently be on phone calls on my way back from a session, just like crying or just really miserable and just be like, I'm sad, somebody talk to me. I thought it was really refreshing to talk to people outside of medicine. Even though they might not get your struggle, they might not get how much you're investing into this one like 8-hour exam, they can give you some perspective and they can talk about like how there are other things in life that are fairly important. And speaking to that last point, I think boundaries are important, especially if you have friends who are also kind of going through the same thing. I think it's super important to be able to relate to them and to connect with them. And at the same time, it's also important to recognize when someone else's energy or your own energy is not healthy for each other. I think it can be like this downward spiral where you both are just like really bouncing off of one another. And there were times when I was just like, okay, I need to not see this person. I need to just do my own thing, like put my head down. And that's when I'd be in the public library out in Valley Ranch. So I wouldn't run into anybody I knew. And that was really good for me because those were the moments that I needed just to make myself feel better about myself, basically. But yeah, these are some good self-care tips. Also, again, it's really important to feel like in solidarity with people in your class, but also reach out to people who are older, like upperclassmen. They've been through it. They know what you're going through. They can provide some perspective. Like, shout out to Fawad Khan. He's an MS4 now. Incredible. Like, I would literally call him like multiple times throughout dedicated. And I'd just be like, Fawad, I am failing. I do not know what to do. And he would literally just sit there going through my schedule and be like, Manal, this is what you can cut out. This is what you can be doing more of. Like, you're fine. You're good. It was just like a really good like cheerleader to have behind me. So identify someone who can be that for you, and reach out to them as much as you can. And honestly, like, I'm happy to do that for any of y'all if you feel comfortable. Again, this is something that I had in my own period, so I would love to pass it on. Okay, I will just really quickly wrap this up. I know it's getting late. So exam day walkthrough. So NBME, you can actually do the free 120 at the actual testing center. So I think you pay a certain amount and it simulates a real exam and check-in process. You can do this if you have test anxiety, if you just kind of are curious about the procedures. It feels very like, almost like TSA, like you're going to the airport or whatever. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely do that. The Dallas site, I didn't test at Dallas. Apparently the parking garage can be tricky to navigate. I would just advise you, wherever you're testing, to check out the testing site the night before, the day before, not the night before, the day before, the weekend before. Just like navigate yourself to that situation, figure out where you're parking, figure out from where you're parking to where you're taking the test, like how you walk there. I ended up having to go to another city to take my exam, so that was really important to me. I drove in with my mom like the day before, sorry, and we drove to the location, made sure I knew where I was going in the morning. You do not want to be like scrambling, trying to navigate like a new campus or a new building the morning of your exam. What to wear. So if you have jewelry or anything with pockets, you'll have to take that off, clear it up. Like they make sure that you don't have anything on you. You can take a jacket into that you can also remove. You can bring food, so they give you a locker so you can pack all your food. You can also, like during your breaks, you allocate when you take your breaks. So I think, I forget how long you get. I forget the total amount of breaks, but like you get to decide, like maybe I'll just go straight through 2 sessions and then two sections, and then I'll just take my break after that. And then take like 10 minutes and then do another 2 sections, another 10 minutes. Up to you. Get some food during those times. I remember I felt like so much adrenaline. I was actually like, I had a hefty lunch and all the snacks, but I ultimately didn't eat majority of it because I was just like really nervous. During your exam breaks, you are allowed to use your phone. You're allowed to use whatever material you want. I don't necessarily think, like I brought first aid with me. Yeah, I will say there were a few questions that I got right specifically for the fact that I was able to like, whoa, I'm forgetting this one thing, brain fart, let me go reference it. But it's sometimes that might not be the most helpful thing too. If you're already anxious, you're already nervous, you can't even think about it, it might just tack on more anxiety. So up to you how you want to use those breaks, if you want to review or if you don't want to. The 15-minute tutorial time, that's a great period just to like get ready, get your thinking cap on, and to write out any formulas that you want onto the sheet that you're given. Use that time if you need it. But yeah, it's okay. It's you'll just run through it. The adrenaline will get you through it, honestly. And I think that's it. Sorry we dragged on for so long. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. I welcome questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourselves, you're totally welcome to do that. I'll also drop my number and email, so if anyone wants to reach out personally, they're more than welcome to do that as well.
I'll be putting my number in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out. If you guys want to know how to apparently just cruise through dedicated, as I've been accused of doing.
I was pulling out a picture. So Mev knows this. I have a cryery. So every time I cry during med school, I take a picture. And so I wanted to share that with y'all. This is me during step because I don't know. Salman's story was just like too unbelievable for me. And I'm like, no, people have to know. It was miserable. Oh, okay. Back to self-care. Please book up an appointment with the counselor. I cannot stress this enough. You don't have to have a quote unquote reason to talk to like a psychologist, psychiatrist. Honestly, this is just good healthcare maintenance. Just take care of yourself. There's so much that goes on in life, even during step, during dedicated, anything could happen. So you want to make sure that you're prepared and you have someone there who's rooting for you and who can help you kind of get through whatever you're going through in life.
Can you hear me? Okay, well, I just want to say a personal thank you to the people that I know on this panel, like YACINE and SALMAN. And it's really great to see them on the other side. And thank you, MANAL and MEHVISH. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. And DAANISH. So this was really nice. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much.
All righty, thank y'all. I don't see more questions in the chat. It was so nice to meet y'all virtually. Please reach out with further questions and have a good night. Best of luck. Bye, Sonams.